Most histories of anime start in the 1960s with Osamu Tezuka's Astroboy and the big TV boom that followed. Fair enough, Mighty Atom was a rocket ship. But that tidy origin story conveniently skips nearly 50 years of strange, scrappy and deeply weird experimentation that came first. Japanese animation didn't begin with a genius in a studio boardroom. It started on street corners, in labour strikes and in the flickering frames of a handful of surviving silent shorts from the 1910s. Anime, as we know it today, has its roots in a couple of distinct art forms. Manga, of course, but also Benshi-narrated silent film and uniquely Japanese media called kamishibai. Let's talk kamishibai, literally paper theatre. From the 1930s into the 1950s, men known as kamishibaya would pedal through neighbourhoods with a little wooden stage strapped to the back of their bike. They'd clack wooden hayashigi sticks to round up the kids, sell some cheap candy, then slide big painted illustration cards through the frame one by one. Every voice, every sound effect, every dramatic cliffhanger pause, all delivered live. At its peak, thousands of these performers were reaching up to 1 million kids a day. Talk about scalable content before the internet. This lo-fi paper cinema left a surprising mark on manga and anime. Bold sequential images, exaggerated expressions, recurring heroes, it's all there. Characters such as the Prince of Gamma and the Gold Bat got their start in the kamishibai before making the transition to manga and eventually anime. Many kamishibai artists later slid right into the manga industry when TV showed up and ruined the street hustle. And when television finally hit Japanese homes in the 1950s, people immediately called it Denki kamishibai, electric paper theatre. The glowing box was just the old neighbourhood storyteller with better tech. Approaching things from the other direction, we find the Benshi. During Japan's long silent film era, these charismatic narrators stood next to the screen and basically became bigger stars than the actors. They explained plots, voiced every character, dropped sound effects and threw in their own jokes. When talkies finally arrived and put a lot of Benshi out of work, some migrated over to the kamishibai stages, live narration traditions flowing from theatre screens to paper cards to flickering animation. While kamishibai felt deeply and distinctly Japanese, rooted in street performance and that familiar travelling storyteller vibe, manga as we understand it owes a huge debt to American comics. In 1923, the illustrated magazine Asahi Graph began running George McManus's Bringing Up Father in daily instalments. It was a smash hit. Jiggs and Maggie's working class immigrant family antics resonated hard in Taisho era Japan, and the strip ran for 17 years until 1940. Its success inspired local creators almost immediately. Yutaka Aso launched Nonkina Tosan, Easygoing Daddy, in the Hochi Shinbun later that same year, a clear spiritual successor full of domestic slapstick and four-panel rhythms. Other American strips followed, and suddenly Japanese artists were experimenting with speech balloons, sequential panel storytelling, and longer narrative arcs in ways that felt fresh and modern. Figures like Rakuten Kitazawa, who helped popularise the term manga in its contemporary sense, and Okamoto Ippi bridged the old single-panel caricatures with this new imported style. Manga didn't grow in isolation. It was a lively conversation with American newspaper comics that got localised, remixed and made Japanese. By the 1920s, Japanese visual storytelling was already a delightful mess of American comics, kabuki flair and these street-level performance traditions. The oldest surviving Japanese animated film is Junichi Koishi's The Dull Sword from 1917. In this roughly 5-minute short, a boastful samurai buys what he thinks is a razor-sharp blade, only to discover it's completely useless. Cue slapstick rage. Koichi animates cut-out paper and silhouette tricks, moving pieces frame by frame. Along with Oten Shimakawa and Satoru Kitayama, the so-called three fathers of anime, these early shorts kicked off a surprisingly vibrant pre-war scene. A lot of it got wiped out by the 1923 Great Kanto earthquake or later wartime chaos, but the stuff that survived and has been rediscovered in recent decades proves the era was no joke. 2 decades later came Japan's first feature-length animated film, Mitsuo Seo's Momotaro Sacred Sailors, which hit screens on April 12, 1945. Commissioned by the Japanese Naval Ministry as propaganda, It turns the classic folktale hero and his animal buddies into Imperial troops assaulting Demon Island, a not so subtle stand-in for the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Made in the desperate final months of the war, the whole thing has this surreal, intense energy. Even inside the propaganda wrapper, Seo managed to sneak in hints of collective spirit and quiet hope. Seo is a fascinatingly contradictory guy. Born in 1911, he was part of the leftist Proletarian Film League of Japan, got arrested and tortured in 1931 for his politics and spent 21 days in jail. After the war, he tried to make a pro-democracy film that Toho basically buried for being too leftist. Radical youth one minute, imperial propagandist the next, leading striking workers after that. The animation world was also full of brutal working conditions. Low pay, long hours, the usual. Major strikes and studio collapses in the late 1940s, in which Seo was at least a participant, if not a driving force, shut down or crippled a bunch of operations. A lot of displaced animators ended up in the manga industry, bringing cinematic pacing, dynamic action, and that sense of sequential flow. They helped turn manga into the narrative juggernaut we know today. Ichi Fukui is a perfect example. He worked as an animator producing war propaganda and then trying to launch a cartoon industry, right up until 1949, and then became one of the key early shonen manga creators with his Batu-kun, or Bat Kid. Young Osamu Tezuka saw Sacred Sailors in 1945 and was reportedly moved to tears by its mix of adventure and submerged hope. He later nodded to it directly in Kimba the White Lion. Tezuka built his whole empire on top of this layered foundation: Kamishiba streets, Benshi voices, early experimental shorts, labour strife, and the complicated legacy of a leftist turned propagandist. Today's video was sponsored by Mountain Town Toys. If you're a toy collector tired of the same old plastic junk and want an action figure with some personality, you've got to check them out. They're the real deal, small batch, handcrafted figures, all made in a little workshop in the Appalachian Mountains. Level up your collection right now at mountaintowntoys.com and punch in the code CBN5 to knock $5 off your order. Anime didn't start with television. It started on a bicycle, in a jail cell, and in the flickering light of paper stages and silent screens. The long tail goes way deeper than you might expect.